In modern political science, we operate on a baseline assumption. We assume that constitutionalism and constitutional democracy work in perfect harmony. The prevailing theory suggests that if you want to sustain a democracy, you require the rigid framework of constitutionalism to protect it. But legal scholar Martin Laughlin identifies a flaw in this thinking. In his book Against Constitutionalism, he argues that constitutionalism is not a neutral vessel for democratic values. It is a specific and contentious governing philosophy that often runs counter to the practice of democracy. Constitutional democracy thrives on friction. It requires a constant, unresolved negotiation between public autonomy, the raw democratic will of the people, and private autonomy, the protection of individual rights. Constitutionalism seeks to eliminate that friction. Its objective is to remove politics from the equation by subordinating the public will to a permanent, self-regulating legal framework. Under this framework, political disputes migrate into the courtroom, where unelected elites act as final arbiters. Laughlin describes this outcome as a juristocracy, a system where legal authority takes precedence over the political life of a nation. The architecture of this ideology began with the 1787 Federalist Papers, followed by a century of strategic judicial expansion at the U.S. Supreme Court that reshaped the nature of the document. Equating a rigid legal system with democracy itself blinds us to what is actually happening: the slow suffocation of active, collective political will formation. This diagram illustrates the engine of a constitutional democracy. Energy continuously flows between constituent power, the active political will of the citizens, and the constitutional rights that protect them. This structure is inherently open. It is dynamic, unpredictable, and demands continuous political engagement from its citizens to maintain its legitimacy. Constitutionalism drops a rigid framework over this engine. It establishes a permanent set of rules designed to lock a specific political identity into place, halting the free flow of popular will. Notice how the structure reorganizes. A single node at the apex illuminates, emitting lines of control downward. That node represents an independent judiciary, tasked with strict supervision over a fundamental, unchangeable law. Under this architecture, the Constitution is no longer just a rulebook for limiting government power. It expands, attempting to represent the entirety of society within a fixed text. The living, breathing political decisions of the citizens are permanently subordinated to a static legal identity. The United States Constitution began in 1787 as a deliberate political project. A group of citizens made a conscious decision to design and shape their future government. Look at the calligraphy here. "We the people" was a literal claim. The document's authority relied on the active consent of its living authors. Thomas Jefferson recognized this reality. He argued that the Constitution required a sunset clause, mandating a rewrite every 19 years, so the dead could not rule the living. The Federalists feared the passions of the public. They wanted a permanent framework, insulated from the need for regular popular approval. The Federalist vision gained momentum through the early 19th century interventions of Chief Justice John Marshall at the Supreme Court. Marshall's rulings repositioned the Constitution from a citizen-authored political project into a self-regulating legal system. A system operates on its own immanent principles of legal order. To maintain its equilibrium over time, it jettisons the intent of its original authors. Instead of citizens rewriting the document to fit new realities, judges reinterpret the existing text. The mechanism of judicial interpretation officially replaced the mechanism of democratic iteration. The U.S. Constitution now operates as a self-sustaining machine. Legal interpretation holds supremacy over political will, leaving the democratic pact of the founding behind. Following the devastation of the Second World War, political architects scattered the seeds of this American constitutionalism across the globe, aiming to prevent the resurgence of totalitarianism. In India, the Constituent Assembly adapted these legal concepts for a massive, newly independent population. They produced a highly centralized system of authority, heavily reliant on a strict catalog of basic rights and sharply differentiated powers. Simultaneously, the post-war German state established its basic law, creating a model that explicitly called itself a constrained democracy. This model relies on a powerful constitutional court, seen here, to make the core features of the regime entirely invulnerable to democratic change. This evolved into ordo-constitutionalism, a framework that explicitly restricts electoral majorities from altering the established liberal or market order, regardless of how the people vote. These global exports demonstrate that constitutionalism functions as a universal mechanism designed specifically to constrain and manage mass democracy. In the era of the total constitution, the framework expands beyond restraining the state. It constitutionalizes every aspect of civil society, engulfing the legislature, the executive, and the private sphere. Under this totalizing system, every political debate, policy disagreement, and social conflict is translated into the narrow legal language of individual rights. Look at the central node. Judges evaluate these conflicts using a tool called proportionality analysis. Irregular, messy political inputs are fed into what is essentially an algorithmic adjudicator, which spits out uniform, binary legal rulings. This reduces the role of elected lawmakers. Legislative action becomes mere executive action, policies that must be audited and justified to a court of law. By bypassing democratic will formation, judges position themselves as the ultimate arbiters of political right. The system matures into a full juristocracy. This has a destructive consequence on political parties. Collective coalition building is emasculated. Citizens are encouraged to pursue individualized, rights-based litigation instead of political organizing. By forcing all political friction through a legal filter, the total constitution effectively neutralizes the possibility of collective, democratic action. Constitutionalism and constitutional democracy are not allies. They are structurally dissonant regimes competing for authority. We have a modern tendency to treat the Constitution as a civil religion, a sacred text to be worshipped and interpreted by specialists, rather than a political pact to be actively debated by citizens. This reverence serves a distinct purpose. It insulates political elites from accountability while paying lip service to the public. The alternative requires citizens to resolve their own tensions through political action, without outsourcing that difficult work to a rigid legal framework. To maintain any real faith in democratic self-rule, the totalizing ideology of constitutionalism must be recognized, critiqued, and finally overcome.